I think Governor Palin is a remarkable leader. I think she brings a lot to the debate and to the table, both nationally and within the Republican Party as well. As to the New York Times quote, it wouldn't have been my style to put the crosshairs on there. But again, there's no evidence to suggest that that had anything to do with this mentally unstable person's rage and senseless acts.
So you
in
think
Arizona.
this
Tim Pawlenty coming out of the box, maybe with a target of his own.
Yeah, interesting. This is his big rollout week with some criticism of Sarah Palin. Top Line begins right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC's Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Jonathan Karl.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest in politics. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/John Karl. John, what is on your mind today? The city's still at a bit of a pause point in the aftermath of Saturday. Yeah,
no question. And my Top Line's big moment. We have the President of the United States going out to Arizona tomorrow for a memorial for the victims. And this really is a big moment for the President, and one that you would think he would be quite well suited for, but it invokes Ronald Reagan after the Challenger, Bill Clinton after the Oklahoma City bombing. And we're expecting him to rise to the occasion.
Well, this is one of those moments that's likely to be remembered for a long time, one for the history books. It's an opportunity for the president, certainly, and we'll watch to see if he gets into this debate over rhetoric. Does he get into debate over guns at all, or does he try to steer clear of the politics in this moment of unity that's still carrying on in Washington and beyond? Next up today, T-Paw's rollout. As we mentioned at the top of the show, Tim Pawlenty has a new book out, and that is rolling right into the presidential expectations game. He, of course, is considering a run for president, and it comes at either a really good moment or a really bad moment, John, because there is an overwhelming political story out there in the aftermath of the Gabby Giffords attack. So it gives an opportunity for Tim Pawlenty to be prominent responding to that, but it also kind of boxes him in because other coverage that you might hear about his book and about his message is going to get eclipsed by the fact that there's a big story.
And I would say that, look, he's got a really steep climb. Let's be honest about this. But I think this is actually a good moment for him because, Pawlenty is the thoughtful conservative. He's the guy who's got a record in Minnesota, somebody who's not been a firebrand. And this gets a chance, to, I think, to play to some of his strengths. Next up, simmer down. Roger Ailes has a message for, quote, our side. This was a fascinating interview, a joint interview that Ailes did with Russell Simmons, hip-hop mogul, not exactly the kind of guy you necessarily think I'm hanging out with. But take a look at this, this quote, or I don't know if we have a graphic for it, but I will read it. I told our guys, shut up, tone it down, make your argument intellectually. And then Rick Ailes goes on to say, you don't have to do that with bombast. I hope the other side does that.
Right. Well, there are sides now in this debate, but that's the first big acknowledgement, I think, from a prominent media executive that there's going to be a change in the tone and the rhetoric and the discussion as a result of the incident over the weekend.
Yeah, and I think it's a message that Ailes is saying with absolute seriousness. Yes. And he made a point to go out and do this.
Yeah, indeed. Next up today, slammer for the hammer. Tom DeLay gets 3 years in prison. A shocking turn of events. If you really look at the entirety of this career, the higher the rise, the lower the fall. A lot of people who watch this case very, very carefully never expected Tom DeLay to spend a day in jail. The fact that he's going to have 3 years actually in prison is rather astounding when you think about it.
Yeah, he will appeal this, so we'll see if he actually gets that. But interesting note on this, Rick, is that DeLay was in town very quietly last week, had a fundraiser for his legal defense fund. You had a lot of the big stars from the old Washington. Bill Paxton was here, Susan Molinari. And he was, I'm told, telling some people there that he was worried that if he had gotten a 10-year sentence under Texas law, he would have actually had to have been taken out in handcuffs. At least he got to avoid that photo op, and he's out on bail.
What is this Top Line, fans? A fifth Top Line, John Karl.
Oh yeah, this is something else. We heard from the Vice President of the United States in Afghanistan today. Take a look at what he said about the potential withdrawal of U.S. troops.
But we are not leaving if you don't want us to leave.
That was Joe Biden talking to President Karzai. We are not leaving if you don't want us to leave. But Rick, do you remember what he said a month ago?
We're going to be totally out of there, come hell or high water, by 2014.
Well, sounds like hell and high water.
Maybe it's hell and high water, yes.
All of those things. We begin today's program up on Capitol Hill. We're honored to be joined by Terrance, who's the Sergeant at Arms in the Senate and a longtime top official on Capitol Hill security. And I want to ask you, first of all, in the aftermath of Saturday, what differences are you anticipating? What differences are you going to be putting into place to ensure security on Capitol Hill and beyond for members of Congress?
Well, we're going to work with the members and the staff to ensure that they understand that there are things that we can do to help them. And that is, number one, always give us the information about threats coming in, no matter how insignificant they may seem to them. And number two, when they're planning an event, they need to think for security. And it might mean as much as one local officer, or it might mean more than that. They just have to plan for that end of their event.
You know, I saw an idea, and it's not a new idea, but it's getting some new attention. Congressman Burton over on the House side has a bill that would put plexiglass over the House chamber to protect those on the floor below from anybody throwing a bomb or something else down there. I mean, what do you make of an idea like that and other potential chances to overreact to all this?
Well, I think it's always good to explore the art of the possible. We actually, a number of years ago, sent people over to England where they did that. Not many of us security types think that's the way we ought to go. There's other methods we can prevent people from doing some harm up in those galleries.
And I want to ask you about another thing that's come out in the last couple of days. There's two members of Congress, at least, who said that they plan on arming themselves at events. And I heard you on Good Morning America this morning saying that's not a good idea. What's your take on that? Why do you think members of Congress shouldn't be, just like any citizen would have a right to carry a weapon, bringing a gun to a public event?
Well, I'm not denying the right if that's the law in their particular jurisdiction. I think what we have to realize is preventing homicides is a pretty complicated matter. And so the response to that is a bit complicated. And more cops or more jails or more guns is not the only answer. Some people need to be locked up and some people need to carry guns. I happen to think law enforcement are the ones who ought to do that, and we can work on all those other methods together to make sure things are safer.
Okay, but help us put some of this into context. You've been up there, Sergeant at Arms. You've been Chief of Capitol Police. You know this threat environment more than anybody. Talk to us about how frequent or rare threats to members of Congress are. How serious the threat is? It growing or is it not?
Well, blessedly, it's relatively rare, given the thousands of interactions that members have with their constituents, whether it's in person or the telephone, email, coming into their office. Last year, we only had 49. The year before, we had 29. I do think there was a uptick in the beginning of 2010 when there was a debate about health care and immigration and, frankly, the war. The fact that people can communicate so quickly, and those who have the inability to communicate smartly and think through this, it causes a little bit more problem. But I don't think these are showstoppers. I think by and large we can handle the threat problem. And again, I don't think more guns is a solution. I've been a policeman for 42 years. I've been to a lot of homicide scenes. More guns to me is not the answer. On the same token, I think having citizens out there with large clips that can hold 32 rounds is not a smart idea either.
49, explain that. 49 threats last year to senators?
Yes, there was 49 threats, I think, to about 38 different senators. They ranged from issues about immigration and health care. Most of them we couldn't figure out what was doing. We worked with the FBI, the Secret Service, and local authorities to track those individuals down. There's been about, I think, 7 prosecutions of those already. I think there's about 8 or 10 pending decisions by a U.S. attorney or local prosecutor. So we do take it very serious. But again, I don't think there's that many of them.
And in the wake of all of this, there's now talk of a new regulation in the House, or a new guidance in the House side, where members of Congress offices will have greater communication and interaction with local law enforcement. Is there any opportunity for that in the Senate? And how do you think that would work out in practice?
Well, I think good communication is good for everybody, and Bill Livingood, the House Sergeant of Arms, myself, and the Chief of the Capitol Police are working towards a joint process. We've had one in place, probably has been less formal than it should be, but I also think that the members and their staffs have been very good about linking up with us when they think they need it, and local law enforcement. If we can develop a process where it's clearly on their radar scope, and tomorrow I'll meet with the Senate staff and the members in their 454 offices to explain the process that I think will solidify how to think through it.
All right, Terrance Gaynor, the Sergeant-at-Arms in the Senate and the doorkeeper.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us and for braving the cold. We really appreciate it.
No problem.